I had another video planned for this week, but I got a question via email that just wormed its way into my brain. I initially dismissed it, but then I couldn't stop thinking about it. The basic gist of the email was, when should you start speaking when learning a second language? And I had a reflexive, immediate answer. But as I've come to learn, there's a huge argument in language learning spaces about this question right now. I'm looking at you, our language learning on Reddit. My initial response to when should you start speaking your target language was right away, but that's actually not quite right. And I realized that it's what I say I do, but it's not what I actually do when I'm studying a language. I've seen some content from language gurus on YouTube claiming you shouldn't aim to speak at the beginning at all, and that's also not right. Most of their claims are not scientific, but are instead advertising. Here's a helpful tip. Why did it take me a full 3 minutes to think of the word tip and not astuce? Anyway, here's a helpful tip. If someone tells you the grammar translation method doesn't work and has been debunked, they're selling you something. Maybe it's a product or an approach that will work for you, but you've left the domain of empirical evidence and entered infomercial territory. So when should you start speaking? We're going to have to get to what exactly we mean by speaking and then figure out when each kind of speaking is right for you. Let's get into it. I'm Dr. Taylor Jones, and this is Language Jones. Today's video is brought to you by italki, a platform that connects language teachers and tutors with language learners. It's thematically related because I'm good like that. But before I do that, I've got big news. It's time to retire my construction paper YouTube plaque because I've hit 100,000 subscribers. So everybody watching, check under your seat. I'm just kidding, you don't get anything. Whatever you find under there, I did not put there. Look at this bad boy. It said Language Jones is good at YouTube. But now, oh yeah. Okay, italki. I've had sponsorships from them in the past, so like 100,000 of you probably know that they're an online platform. They have over 150 languages with native level tutors and teachers who can guide you on your language learning process. You already know that I strongly endorse speaking with real people and that there's just something different about actual conversations in terms of how it affects your literal brain circuitry compared to AI apps or textbooks or whatever. It's why I will never forget the word Bekarov. You probably already know that they have their own video conferencing platform and mobile app, but I just found out last week that you can search for teachers by your schedule availability. So if you've got an hour on a Tuesday evening, you can line up some conversation practice in your target language. As the father of a toddler, this is an absolute game changer. When you decide to speak to real people, which we'll get to in just a second, I can confidently endorse italki. I'm not just a sponsor, but I'm also a client.
I'm not only the hair club president, but I'm also a client.
הדירה שלנו זה הבניין.
So click through in the link in description for $5 free with your first $10, or use my promo code on screen. Whether you use italki or not, speaking is an important part of language learning. I know that there are literally dozens of you out there who are yelling at your screen right now that you don't need to speak your target language because you're studying like Sumerian or something, but honestly, even then, if you want to really understand it, it helps. Active recall of vocabulary, having combined syntactic structures in a way that communicates your thoughts, and figuring out how to do all of this in real time is the next level of linguistic mastery. That's part of why I don't say I know languages that I have a decent reading knowledge of. There's some languages I just recognize. Like, I understand in the moment, but it's like if I see you and I vaguely remember you from somewhere versus being able to give a sketch artist a useful description of you. So when I was asked when to start speaking, I reflexively, without thinking, literally blurted out right away, obviously. But it's not that simple. And I realized I actually kind of, sort of, maybe don't. First, what do you even mean by speaking? At the risk of this channel slowly devolving into me just repeating over and over again that different people mean different things with the same words, and most of our disagreements are deeper disagreements about the definitions of words we're using, I think it's important to break apart what we mean by speaking. There's levels to this. So when I say I speak from the first day, I'm not speaking with native speakers, at least not necessarily. What are you going to do? Just find 50 people and say to each of them, hello, I am an American, nice to meet you, goodbye? You're trying to actually learn a language here, not shock locals by being a YouTube fake polyglot. Pretty much by definition, you can't have a conversation when you first start and your speaking is super limited. You have no vocabulary. You know no grammar. You can't reliably recognize words, whether spoken or written. But at the same time, speaking can be crucial for advancing, and if you wait too late, You'll get to an advanced level in the language, at least in theory, but be completely unable to carry on a simple conversation. I'll break down what I think the levels are and when to jump into each, but first I want to give an example of why this matters. I'm acquainted with a very smart, very dangerous man. Black belt in jiu-jitsu, department chair in a STEM field, and he speaks a bunch of related languages. We were recently talking and he challenged me on my claim in another video that comprehension always has to come before production because he can, in fact, speak one of those languages at a very advanced level but has a very difficult time understanding when spoken to. The others, I've heard him just fire away and make jokes and generally demonstrate a high degree of fluency. The one he said he struggled with has a more complicated phonology that the others don't. I don't know why I'm trying to keep their privacy. It was French that was messing him up. Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, they all have like 5 to 8 vowels. French has like 20 of those dudes with all the U's and U's and so on. He had an incredible base of knowledge, and on paper, the words looked similar enough that it took nothing to remember them. But when we spoke, I could hear that he had simplified the learning process in a very smart way, but one that gets you advanced in production and reading recognition, but not necessarily comprehension. It wasn't even strictly an American accent. It was the accent of someone who has intelligently broken down the learning process to facilitate maximum breadth of language knowledge and leverage other existing knowledge. Like I said, he's a smart guy. If you're in the same boat, not just for French, but like Danish or whatever, you can rocket ahead in vocabulary, but the inputs and outputs are going to be mapped a little weirdly. Here's what I mean. Let's take something like position before submission. In French, to stick with my example, that's position avant soumission. Seeing that on the screen, that's not hard. Like, you should all be able to make position and position mapped to one another. So you can even keep the English word as your core mental object. In writing, it's the same, and soumission is not the same, but, very similar. But now you have a mapping problem from your mental object, the word, to 2 separate but related things, maybe even 3. First, you have mapping the mental object to the right sounds. We already have that in English, but we also need it in French. So English will have an aspirated P, an off-glide on the O, a voiced sibilant, and so on. Some things are the same, like the number of syllables, and some are completely different, like word and phrase level stress patterns. It all percolates up levels, so especially for a language like French, you have a cascading failure that might lead to the language learner equivalent of a core dump when you go order a coffee and get an unanticipated response. By the way, please like and subscribe if you haven't, and leave me a comment with your best deer-in-the-headlights moment in your second language. This is where speaking early gets really important. If you learn pronunciation rules, which are admittedly often really boring and tedious, you develop a really strong mapping of words, symbols, and sounds, including the mouth gestures used to make those sounds. That in turn helps you with the second mapping, which is the inverse problem. You get sounds and you have to figure out where the words start and stop and what those words are. My whole point here is that when you practice a correct mapping of sounds, symbols, and mental objects, in part by learning to produce the right sounds, that is, speaking, you get good at hearing them and the words just pop out of the speech stream without effort. When I listen to a language I don't know well but I've studied, I don't hear a long stream of confusing sounds. I hear gibberish with distinct words I know jumping out clear as day. The third level of that mapping is to casual speech in reduced forms. This is often the hardest for language learners, but I maintain that if you learn the correct mappings, you'll start to intuit the lazy mappings precisely because your mouth is like everybody else's and you're subject to the same pressures. This is hard and it's not what they teach you in your textbook, so see my video on They Speak Too Fast for more on that. This is all very distinct from having conversations and from speaking. So here are the levels of speaking, at least according to me, and when I would engage in each. First is the honeymoon period, where speaking is just getting those mappings of sounds and producing words more or less correctly. This is what I do when I say I speak from day one. Once you know a little bit, within a few weeks, you should be starting to think about phrase and sentence level intonational contours and how things fit together. How are they reduced in casual speech? Where can they not be? This is where I would encourage shadowing if you're into that kind of thing. Personally, I use Audacity to isolate audio if it's from something longer like a lesson. By the way, you should be using audio from Jump. Did I say that? You should be using audio. Anyway, I'll record myself and compare. Sometimes, if I'm feeling froggy, I'll use Prot to compare by using a spectrogram. It sounded right to me, but did my intonation actually match the native speaker's rise and fall? Was my doubled consonant actually as long as theirs? Was it too long? This is admittedly dork level stuff and you don't have to do it, but you can, and even just a little bit is really helpful. I use Audacity and Pratt for these, both of which are free. You don't need to know how to really read a spectrogram either. You can just look at isolating things and comparing, do these look alike or really different? Warning, by the way, this will give you really good pronunciation, and then people will talk to you like you're a native speaker. Fast, casual, and even if you remind them that you don't speak natively and you need them to slow down, they'll just hear your good pronunciation and unconsciously go back to not accommodating your level. The next level is free but structured conversation. This is going into a cafe and ordering something. This is interview style stuff. This is where YouTube fake polyglots live. Safe conversations because you know the contours. Hello, nice to meet you. Where are you from? What made you want to study language X? You can even control the conversation by doing a mix of facilitation and active listening. At this point, you should be engaging with real people. If you live somewhere where the language is spoken, it's easy. And if you don't, guess what? It's still easy because you have resources like italki at your fingertips. And then you can regroup when you figure out what you didn't know, but you needed to. Personally, I like to get the broad strokes of the grammar before I move to completely unstructured conversations. But you can work on things with native speakers even before that. You just have to tell them, hey, I don't know how to say anything in the past tense or whatever it is. So while I do recommend speaking from jump, I also don't actually do that if we mean conversing and not just the literal physical act of speaking with nobody around to hear it. My personal preference is get a handle on the grammar, past, present, future, subordinate clauses, subjunctives, and so on, and do so with a relatively small workman-like vocabulary where you have just enough that things can be explained in the target language if people are creative enough. Then, as much conversation as you can do. Yes, listening to advanced materials like podcasts can help. Yes, obviously, more study can help. But unstructured conversation will immediately reveal what you don't understand and what you understand but can't say effectively or quickly enough. Then you study that while developing the skills to stall, make small talk, react in more varied ways, and so on. But if someone is selling you not speaking at all for 3 months, or speaking in conversations from the first day, these are gimmicks. Yes, start speaking, but start small and scaffold your way up. And when you don't understand something spoken, if you can, it's incredibly helpful to either break it down by slowing it down or use a spectrogram to figure out what the exact sounds are. And then why they're those and not what's written or what you were taught. I hope this was helpful. If you like what I'm doing with the channel, please like and subscribe and leave me a comment. It is great for the algorithm. If you'd like to support the channel, you can. I have a Patreon at www.patreon.com/languagejones, and you can also support the channel right here with super thanks and super chat. And if you liked this video, YouTube thinks that you might like this one, and that's basically their whole job. So you should probably check it out. Until next time, happy learning, and go talk.